Your Brain Rebalanced Radio Show. This is Season 2, Episode 4. This is Noah Brisley-Zell Church. I'm here with my regular co-host, Charlie. And we have two very special guests, Gabe Deem of Reboot Nation, and Gary Wilson, the infamous and famous speaker of the Great Porn Experiment TED Talk.
Hi.
Say hello, guys.
What's
Hello,
up?
guys.
How you guys doing? Doing good.
Well, you've both been on this show before, right? But separately.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Well, we're honored to have you here at the same time. That's a lot of big personalities, though. I'm kind of worried.
Yeah. Sorry, I'm a very small personality, so I essentially
Good.
have no personality.
Good to have balance.
I'll try and not cut Gary off like I did on the first radio show I did with him.
I'd rather listen to you than listen to me, anyhow.
Well, your voice was so quiet on my speakerphone, so I kept talking because I didn't hear anything.
All right, well, let's start with some news. Gabe, I saw you posted a new video, right, from Reboot Nation?
Yeah, I did a video about all the porn myths and misconceptions we see in the media and what the naysayers throw at us all the time to try and discredit porn addiction and porn-induced sexual dysfunctions and to say that porn isn't causing problems. So,
Yeah. What is the myth that annoys you the most, that you hear so often that you just can't stand anymore?
Probably the number one myth that really grinds my gears is that only guys with issues watch porn. And that's just ridiculous because every guy with an internet connection watches porn, and especially if you have a 10-year-old boy with unlimited access to naked girls, he's going to watch porn. He doesn't have to be, have a low self-esteem. He doesn't have to be afraid of talking to real-life girls. He could be the biggest player at the school, the biggest athlete, and have any girl available and still want to watch naked girls having sex on a screen. So that's the biggest one for me.
Yeah, that's the big question that people often bring up. Well, did porn cause the problems, or did the problems drive you to porn? And
Right, yeah.
I mean, I think people turn to porn for a lot of reasons, but curiosity was why I turned to it at first.
Sure.
And
Yeah.
I think as time went on, I started to use it as more of a way to escape from loneliness and bad feelings, and that's when it became more unhealthy for me.
Yeah.
Would you agree with that?
Well, yeah, there's definitely two different groups, and it's not a blanket statement that fits to everybody, right? So, yeah, there's guys that have legitimate issues or problems that turn to porn, but there's also guys that don't. And then, as you said, a lot of guys start out with no problems, and later on down life, they kind of turn to porn when they have an issue. But the main thing that everyone needs to understand, and what I'm passionate about, is that when you take a little teenage boy and he's watching internet porn every day, that is going to lead to problems, regardless if an issue is present or not.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's the main point, is porn is causing problems.
Well,
And even if your penis still works, there's probably still quite a bit of problems that are caused by that habit.
Yeah, morphing sexual taste, lower motivation, less mental clarity, all sorts of stuff.
Difficulty connecting in relationships, I think, is a big one, too.
Yeah.
What were you about to say, Gary?
well, there's only one study that has removed porn as a variable, and it was a study that had adult men who were in relationships, and they removed porn for 3 weeks, and they compared them to a control group, and they found significant changes in just 3 weeks in terms of perceptions of their partners and commitment to their partners. So these are non-addicted guys. They are adults who didn't grow up on internet porn, and they just removed it for 3 weeks, and yet they saw significant changes. And there are internet addiction studies. There's about 5 of them. And these 5, 3 of them started off and followed some groups of people who hadn't used the internet, and they saw brain changes and psychiatric changes that occurred because of internet use. Then there were 2 brain changes of internet addiction where they followed guys who quit internet use, and they saw a reversal of the brain changes in the frontal cortex and a change in their cognitive functions. That means thinking, memory, etc. So all the studies that have followed users or followed users who quit have seen changes. So that's pretty significant.
And this is all posted to your website, yourbrainonporn.com, right? People want to read more about it?
Yes, it is.
All right. I'm sure everyone who listens to the show already knows about it, but just in case, I'll plug it.
Yeah, it was a seamless plug. Don't worry.
So,
Gabe, I just
leading-
want to say,
yeah.
Gabe, I really liked your video. I have one recommendation though.
Yeah, what's that?
Something I just heard. Okay, so there's apparently this psychological phenomenon where people don't click on videos as much if it's over 10 minutes.
Yes, I'm well aware of that. But
Okay, I just wanted to know if you were.
Here's my issue with that, and I've expressed this to Gary before. It drives me nuts that guys with broken penises can't take 18 minutes to watch a video, or take a couple hours to read. You know, in my first video, my advice video, I said, first thing, get educated. So go to yourbrainonporn.com and take a day off work. Spend your Saturday reading the FAQs and learn everything you can. If you have a dick that doesn't work and you're a 20-year-old guy and you can't do that, we can't help you. I mean, I don't know what to I don't know what to say if you can't at least spend a couple hours reading the science. So yes, I agree, and I know that shorter videos are better, but I would rather get good content out there than be flashy and catchy and keep the ADD people watching it. But I know that they need help, but it's just so hard to not to summarize your concepts in 2 or 3 minutes. You just can't say everything you need to say.
Yeah.
So I'll try my best to make the next one
No,
short.
I wasn't saying do anything. I just wondered if you knew. I think that's a good point, though.
My next video is going to be 30 seconds long. I'm going to say, porn gave me a limp noodle. Bye.
Perfect for my attention span.
Yeah.
Well, I have a problem with that too, because I see the guys on these forums spending hours reading posts and clicking from post to post, yet they won't spend literally 10 minutes and read the Start Here article. I have 2 Start Here articles on YBOP. Start Here, Rebooting Basics. Start Here, Porn-Induced ED. Takes about 10 minutes to read each, and they pretty much answer every question that keeps getting repeated over and over and over and over. Then they won't take an hour to watch the new Porn-Induced ED video, which covers every question pretty much. If they just spent that time, that would answer 98% of their questions, but they won't do it. So does bug me a little bit.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I definitely watched when I first knew about my problem. I watched all your stuff right away. But I swear that's the minority of people who have the patience to watch all the stuff, read everything that they can read. So part of me wonders if we should cater to that large group of people who, for whatever reason, just can't seem to do it. But I don't know. I really don't know.
Change has to come from within.
Yeah, I suppose.
And I think all we can do is put the information out there, and if people want to read it or watch it, then they can do that and change their lives with it. And if they don't, then there's nothing we can do to stir up motivation in them, really.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah, and the thing about Your Brain on Porn, it's not just there for guys who are quitting porn. A lot of other people use it as a resource. And then, of course, the naysayers use it. They look they read through it and say, oh, this isn't covered, this isn't covered. So some articles cover quite a bit. Some others are rather simple because it's a resource for many different reasons.
Yeah. And the myth video is actually not necessarily for addicts or people with dysfunctions. It was actually more for the naysayers and the people that try and argue. So
Yeah.
So Gary, can you tell us a little bit about some of the most exciting research coming out recently or coming out soon?
Well, yeah. I mean, we know that there's been the Valerie Boone studies, 2 of them that were brain studies, and they showed the same changes that occur in other addicts. We know we had the Max Planck study that also followed porn users, and it correlated the amount of porn use, the years of porn use, to brain changes, and also to less arousal when watching images, nude images. We suspect that there'll be about 2 or 3 more studies from Valerie Boone. There's also some other people I can't mention who are young guys who are working on studies also, who've contacted me. And so there are some studies I can't really discuss. There also is a study coming out from a couple of researchers on porn-induced CD in a few weeks, but I think Gabe got a response to that because they've already put out the full study and advertised it. So Gabe is going to have a response to that particular study.
Swag.
And that's all we have to say about that.
Yeah.
Oh, come on. Our audience can keep a secret, can't you guys?
Basically, you remember when tobacco, they were finding they were having problems, and some studies were coming out saying it was positive. We're seeing the same thing happen, so we got to call out the bullcrap when we see it.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and as Gabe pointed out in his video, what they do is they'll actually acknowledge that some people do have problems using porn, and they aren't compulsive, but they look like people who are addicted. So they look like people are addicted, they act like people are addicted, and they have withdrawal symptoms like people are addicted, but they're not addicted. So what's going on with these people? Well, we have two choices. So the naysayers will say, oh, they have pre-existing conditions, these vague pre-existing conditions, or they have high sexual desire. And both of those were addressed in Gabe's video. So if you are a compulsive porn user, you have higher libido than the rest of the world. However, as Gabe pointed out, what happens when you stop using porn, Gabe?
You go into a flatline with a limp dick, and you can't even masturbate without porn.
That doesn't sound like high sexual desire to me, does it?
Nope.
No.
Nope.
So that's immediately just nonsense. And as Gabe also pointed out, the frequency of masturbation certainly can be higher in some porn users, but some just masturbate once a day, which is sort of normal, I think, historically, but they're using porn and they're conditioning their sexual response to a screen. So these explanations about what really is porn addiction just fall apart. Like the pre-existing conditions. Well, let's look at this. What choices do we have for pre-existing conditions? We have obsessive compulsive disorder, we have ADHD, we have depression. However, many guys who become porn addicts have none of these, and the vast majority of people who have OCD or ADHD or depression never become addicted to anything. So these simply fall apart, and the dog agrees with me.
Yeah, I was going to say on that, I didn't have time to talk about it in my video, or else I would have lost everyone. But a lot of my friends, the guys who didn't develop porn-related problems, actually masturbated more than myself and my 2 or 3 buddies that had porn-induced ED and delayed ejaculation. We usually only watched porn and masturbated once or twice a day. My friends that masturbated without porn, they were doing it 3 to 4 times a day sometimes during our teenage years, and they were fine, but they weren't using porn until they were like 19 or 20. So that was just an interesting observation after talking with all my friends.
Yeah, we lost Charlie. I'm trying to get him back, but in the meantime, I think we have plenty to talk about.
Oh yeah, there's a lot more.
Oh yeah.
Definitely. Well,
So-
Gary, do you wanna talk about how the sexologists and naysayers will say that it can't be internet porn that's causing the problems? It's got to be something else. What do you have to say about that?
Well, they point to something else, but they can't consistently point to any one thing, can they? As I said, what is it that causes issues? Well, it doesn't really matter if you have issues. As Gabe pointed out in his video, you're not born addicted to cigarettes. You're not born addicted to cocaine. You're not born addicted to anything. You have to chronically overconsume any substance or stimuli in order to change the brain so that it becomes hyperreactive to that substance or stimuli. And that's called sensitization, where you create these Pavlovian circuits that just blast the reward center and really up dopamine that cause craving. And if that continues, then you have further brain changes like desensitization, which is lower dopamine. You have hypofrontality, which means your frontal cortex can't control your impulses so well. You have changes in your stress circuits over time, where if you're under stress, that activates the reward center and causes craving. So there's multiple brain changes that have been identified over the last 30 to 40 years in animal experiments, in human experiments, and these brain changes only occur with chronic overconsumption of X, whatever X is.
Right.
And that's a fact. That's simply a fact.
Yeah, my mind was blown when I first saw your video, Gary, and I saw it about 5 or 10 times, I think. And I just realized how much my brain had been altered by my habits. And I don't know about you guys, but over the last year and 2 months, I guess it's been now, I've felt those changes happening, reversing in my brain, and I felt how that affects my mood, my ambition, my outlook, my relationships. And this is not just some abstract concept. It affects every part of my life.
Absolutely. Yeah. Just every facet of your life, emotionally, mentally, physically, it all intersects.
And of course, if you look at something that cannot be denied, I don't care what they say, and that's porn-induced ED in healthy young men who are at the peak of their manliness, right, guys? And this is
Should be.
I am now.
Yeah.
a physical symptom, which no other cause. And then it takes months and months to heal, and you go through sometimes severe withdrawal symptoms. And that shows you that porn has the power to alter many regions of the brain. It has to, in order to cause chronic ED in healthy young men. Undeniable symptom caused by one thing: porn use.
Yeah, I think it was on your website, Gary, a post about a study that showed that something like 20 or 30% of young men reported problems with erectile dysfunction, whereas before in, I think, the 60s, the last time this had been surveyed, it was like 2%. Does that sound familiar to you, Gary?
Yeah, there's been about 5 studies that have come out in the last 2 years. The most shocking one was of adolescents ages 16 to 21, and they found that boys, 54% of them, I believe it is, had problems with ED.
Yeah,
ages
it was
16 to 21. That is crazy.
Yeah, at that age, I already had severe ED.
Me too. It was higher than the
Absolutely
senior citizen
unable to
bracket,
have sex.
if I remember right.
Oh, yeah, it was higher than than guys in their 50s and 60s.
Yeah.
That's just inconceivable to me.
Yeah, it's wild.
And so
I was
there's been
gonna-
about. Well, I was
Go
just
ahead,
going to say
Gary.
there's been about 4 of those studies, a couple by the Army, a few other ones, one by Swedish, and all of them found ED prevalence in young men in their 20s of 30% or higher.
Wow. Yeah, and when I first experienced that, it felt like I was alone, and it took a few years to find out that I wasn't alone at all.
Yeah.
And what people are suggesting is causing the increase in young guys with ED are things like alcohol, tobacco, poor diets, performance anxiety, stress. You'll hear all that, or that we have a moral problem and we're just ashamed and all that stuff.
Wow.
But the problem with that is so easy to shoot out with porn-induced ED, because if you're a young teenage boy, first of all, tobacco and all that stuff takes years to develop problems, but they're trying to masturbate without porn, and they can't. But if you turn on porn, unless it's really severe porn-induced ED, if you turn on porn, bam, you can get a boner. That shoots out everything that anyone could ever say. It clearly shows sexual conditioning, and then the argument's over, you can go home.
Yeah, let's look at what the new variable is. I mean, alcohol, tobacco, stress, they've all been around for thousands of years.
Yeah.
Right, and if
What's-
alcohol or tobacco were the problem, simply turning on porn doesn't make that organic problem go away.
Right.
Oh, and then there's this thing that tobacco use has dropped significantly in the last several decades,
Right.
and even drug use has dropped significantly. And you got to remember that tobacco. How does tobacco cause ED? Well, it causes it by causing artery disease. Well, that takes decades to manifest, so that's just silly to suggest tobacco in 20-year-olds.
Yeah, my vision for the future is to have porn be kind of like tobacco is in modern culture. People still use it, a lot of people still use it, but everyone goes into smoking knowing the risks, knowing what what could happen.
Yep,
Absolutely.
Yep, that's our model too.
Yeah.
yep.
A nice FDA warning on that.
Yeah. May cause limp dick.
So I kind of have a question.
Yeah.
So when we look, because we can kind of look at like tobacco as a model of this, right? That's what we were saying. How long do you think it will take for this sort of knowledge to enter the cultural zeitgeist? You like how I use zeitgeist there? That was pretty cool. But like to enter the public awareness. Gary, do you have any thoughts? Do you have any expectations with this? How about you, Gabe? I don't know who wants to go first, but
I think I'll go first. Now we give this a lot of thought, and it's clear that it's going to get a lot worse before it gets better. And you look at the internet, and the internet doesn't really represent reality. So if people link to YBOP, then you see on a forum a bunch of people underneath it going, "Oh, that's bullshit. That's crazy. That can't happen. Porn doesn't cause problems." So quote after quote after quote. But if I'm out there talking to real people who aren't on the internet flaming, they actually all agree. Of course, porn causes addiction. Of course, porn addiction exists. So the general meme in the public is there's an agreement that porn addiction exists. Now, there is a strong, very vocal minority of sexologists who are doing their best to counteract this meme with everything they got. And they have access to the media, the news media, and they are often quoted. So there's going to be a battle within the media for a very long time. And studies, it's going to take a while for studies to come out, but here's the bad thing is the other side of sexologists are continuing to pump out crap studies that you can easily dismantle, yet they are quoted in the media as being legitimate, and they just simply are headlines without any substance. So it's going to be a battle for quite a while, I suspect, and of course we know sexuality is a very controversial area anyhow, so I really don't know the answer to it. I'll have Gabe talk about it.
I think I'm a little more optimistic. I think it's going to happen pretty quick, just with the way information's set up today with the internet. Things can go viral, social media. You can share something really quick, and I've already been on Katie Couric and a couple other news, pretty wide stream, mainstream news stuff. So a lot of people have found out about it in the last 2 years, but obviously we're still real far away from it being common knowledge and everyone knowing about it. But
we're getting there, though.
Exactly. I think as soon as some of these studies come out, as Gary was talking about, in the next couple years, that show evidence for porn-induced ED, and we already have one that shows some correlation with the Cambridge study, with 60% of the subjects had porn-induced ED with partners, but not with porn. So we already have one, and there's going to be more that actually show more causation when you have urologists take porn away, and you see guys get their erections back. So that's coming, and that'll happen soon. What, Charlie?
That's the thing. I feel like that's the thing that's different from the whole tobacco analogy, is that we have people that have sexual dysfunction, quit porn, and now don't have sexual dysfunction. With tobacco, I mean, maybe somebody quits tobacco and they're able to breathe a little better, but that doesn't really.
They already have cancer. It's probably too late.
Yeah, they already have cancer, and they're exactly.
Yeah.
That's the one optimistic.
Yeah, exactly.
thing.
Because if you think about every porn study, pretty much every addiction study, every psychological study, it's all about correlation, isn't it? We correlate X with Y. But this is different. This is, like Charlie said, different from every medical condition. You can remove a variable, and then you can see the remission of a medical condition. There is no stronger proof than that. That is absolutely above and beyond anything you could ever do.
Yeah.
Unless you say, oh, it's just a placebo effect. But there's no way to do a blind study. If someone's watching porn or not watching porn, they're going to know that they're watching porn or not watching porn.
Yeah, and it's important. It's important to say there too, with the placebo effect myth, is that in 2008, 2009, 2010, when the first guys were having porn-induced ED and giving it up, they didn't know that giving up porn could cure their ED, so there couldn't be a placebo effect. They had nothing to really latch onto. They were the first guys to give up porn and got their boners back, so it couldn't have been placebo for those guys. And
one of the most inspiring things about your story, Gabe, for a lot of people is that it took you over 9 months to regain erectile function, right?
Right, yeah, it took me, I was in a deep flatline for 6 months, and that's with no relapses or anything. And then it took me actually 15 months to be able to get 100% erection with just my hands touch alone and not porn fantasy. So,
yeah,
deep sexual conditioning, very deep.
And I recovered a little bit quicker than that, but still, it just keeps getting better and better, and I don't know where it tops out. I don't know where recovery stops, and I can say I'm fully recovered as if I'd never seen porn.
Yeah. There's just a 2-year recovery story on YBOP this morning, I think. Is that right, Gary? I didn't read it, but I saw the headline.
Oh, I don't know. I'll have to check that out.
Yeah.
It was 2 years. We put it up, but he was going back and forth, doubting that it could be porn, as they often do. And this brings us back to the original thing about placebo is the guys who now blog or post on NoFap don't understand the historical context. The context is that guys started to remove porn back in 2005, 2006, and there were just a few stories and they didn't really have access to each other's stories. There wasn't any meme. None of them believed porn could cause it, but they would all go through the same symptoms and they recover in about 6 to 8 weeks. And this continued for several years, both on Reuniting, on MedHelp, on several other forums like bodybuilding.com. It wasn't until 2011 or 12 that NoFap even started to take off, or Your Brain Rebalanced in 2012. So there was 6 to 8 years of people not contacting each other and yet revealing these stories of these same condition of erectile dysfunction healing in the same manner. So there wasn't a meme out there. There wasn't a way to even have a placebo effect because you were alone out there reporting this.
And just for the record, I was skeptical at first. I saw that these guys were saying porn caused their ED, and I laughed. I was like, yeah, right. I've been watching porn for years, and I've been able to have sex, all through high school and college. And it wasn't until I saw the porn-induced ED test where, see if you can masturbate without porn, and that's when I was like, I haven't done that since I was like 14, so let me try. And so I tried, and I was sitting there even using, the test said not to use porn fantasy. But I was like, okay, using my hand didn't work, so I was like, I'm going to start fantasizing about stuff. And even thinking of the craziest stuff that I've ever watched, I could not get a boner without porn. And then I ran back into my room, I turned on porn, and then bam, I could get an erection. And then that's when I just broke down crying, and I was like, holy crap.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I kind of want to bring it back to the whole cultural awareness of this. Do you guys expect any, because we haven't seen it yet, I don't think, but any pushback from the actual porn industry materializing in this whole process?
Man, I don't know. I feel like that's the porn industry. I feel is going to be in the future a small section of porn, because the future is going to be couples having sexting and having phone sex over. Yeah, amateur porn is really going to be the future, where everyone's just their own porn producer and anyone can upload anything. So I try and stay out of the porn industry stuff just because I know that, for instance, there's kids hooked on cartoon porn and all sorts of stuff that everyone's producing themselves. And to focus on the porn industry, yes, it's important. Someone needs to do that, but it's a much bigger picture because you have so much amateur porn and cam sites and all sorts of stuff like that.
That's a good point.
Yeah,
As far as cultural,
the industry is worried about us at all. They're making billions of dollars, and we're just a little fly on the wall. They're not concerned.
Maybe a decade from now, yeah, but I don't know.
I think their product sells itself for now. They don't really need to combat us because porn is very alluring on its own.
Yeah, because it's so attractive and addicting in nature that you have so many guys. Look at just on the forums. You have so many guys that know porn caused their erectile dysfunction, and they still watch porn over and over and over again. So I don't think their business is going to be hurt for a long time.
Yeah.
Sadly.
Yeah, definitely.
As far as cultural effects that we see from this, and you said that you thought it would get worse before it gets better, Gabe. That reminded me of Japan, where there's a high consumption of porn and high consumption of extreme porn. And we see a large portion of young people who just have no interest in real sex.
Yeah, I actually had a therapist look me in the eyes and say, I think kids are going to evolve, and eventually porn's not going to cause problems, because they're just going to evolve with those iPhones in their little baby hands, and then they're going to be able to have boners to porn and real people. And I fired back. I said, well, then explain to me why the countries with an increased access and internet with young people, like Japan, and I even cited, that 30% of them, 40% of them aren't even interested in sex. The 16 to 19-year-old population, they're hooked to their cartoon girlfriends. So he didn't have an answer for that, and I think that's a good point that you just brought up, Noah, is that the countries that do have an increased access, they've just shown an increase in problems. It's not like we're evolving to our screens.
Yeah, I believe they call those people herbivores.
Yeah.
Which, as a vegan, I take offense to that, but
Herbivores?
yeah.
Well, yeah, the more connected we get online, the more disconnected we get in real life. And so in Japan, you have whatever they're called. I don't know the word. I've heard of a different one also.
Hikikomori?
Hikikomori?
Yeah, hikikomori, where they literally lock themselves in their room.
Yeah, they become shut-ins, agoraphobics.
They always order delivery. They never go get their food. So yeah, that's what's happened. To me, whenever I got hooked on porn and video games, my social level completely plummeted, and I was just on screens all day long. I would rather talk to people on Facebook and social media rather than talk to them in real person, not consciously, but just subconsciously. Obviously, I would never say that, like, yeah, I'd rather be on a screen, but that's just how my life played out because my brain was telling me this is where the reward is.
It was more comfortable, yeah. No, I was definitely there too.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, now that I've cut out porn and TV and video games as well, I feel that, like, boredom, and instead of reaching out to some artificial stimulus, I reach out and meet people or talk to people.
Yeah.
And I feel like that's a much more natural way to get your kick, is socially. And it's been a great effect, great side effect.
More fulfilling, I suppose.
So have you guys seen the documentary Web Junkies?
Is that the one you linked to me?
Perhaps. Yeah, I saw it recently, and it's about, in China, the Chinese government has declared web addiction and web gaming addiction to be the #1 threat to their youth. And they opened up 400 boot camp style rehab centers all over their country. And parents, how it usually works is they'll trick their children, like they'll say, "Oh, we're going to the doctor, honey," and then they drop off their internet addicted kid to this boot camp, or even drug them while they're, like, before they go to sleep, and drop them off at this boot camp, and they spend a few months there getting drilled and educated and learning about how their web addiction, usually to video games, has impacted their life and impacted their family, and they have family counseling sessions. What do you guys think about all that?
They roofie their kids and bring them to therapy.
Yeah, I think I frown upon the drugging their kids thing, but I think getting out in nature and unplugging from the internet is a great idea, but forcing a kid to do it, I don't know. I think he's gonna be pretty hateful when he gets back.
Yeah.
Maybe not.
Yeah.
Maybe once his brain rebalances, he'll be happy that they did it, but I don't know.
Yeah, internet. Go ahead, Gary.
You know, yesterday there was a news report where a young man from China cut off his left hand to try to stop his internet addiction. So that gets pretty severe when you want to cut off your left hand to do it. They sewed it back on, but there you go.
Wow.
Yeah, so
Are you
Korea.
serious?
Yeah, serious. North Korea and China are the two major countries that are actually doing studies on internet addiction. They're doing brain studies. They have close to 90 now, and all of them show the same brain changes you see in drug addicts. So they are very concerned about their kids. Now, I have a little personal story. I have a son who's 25, and he works in the computer field, and he was just playing video games like a slug, you know, and gained weight. And at age 15, we sent him away on a 3-week go to the Olympic National Park and climb mountains for 3 weeks in a row. He lost like 30 pounds, came back, changed his diet, threw away his gaming stuff, and has never been addicted since. Just unplugging for 3 weeks made him realize the effect that all that video gaming had on him. And today he keeps up all those habits even though he works in the computer field.
Yeah.
Wow.
I remember when I was little, my parents I played tons of video games, and they would notice that I was really ornery and mad after they told me to stop. Like, I would just be super moody. And so they kind of found some sort of, like, relationship for that, and they were always skeptical about video games after that. But it really does change your mood and creates a little world for you to live in.
Yeah. And I don't think gaming, at least for me, was as powerful of an addiction as porn, because porn is tied in with the sexual response system, which is our most powerful drive. But gaming, like porn, is a super stimulus. It's much more exciting imagery than we would ever really see in real life. And
those two things meshed for me. They kind of created like a world where, like, here was my sex, and I could have all my sexual fulfillment there, and then here was where I put my productive energy. This is what I worked
into
on.
video games, right?
Yeah, but it was
like
behind the screen.
A complete life prosthetic.
Yeah, that's so true. Yeah, it was just artificial.
Well, think about it. You know, what are the major things that activate the reward center and activate dopamine? Well, of course, we know it's food, but then we have sex, novelty, achievement. Those are big things that we drive towards in real life. And so dopamine's released in order to get us to achieve something, like to become the alpha male in a chimp, organization, or to go out and chase real women, or whatever. But now you're getting dopamine released, and you're not accomplishing a damn thing. you're just jerking off to a screen, or you're just getting extra numbers on some video game. You've accomplished nothing, but your brain thinks you've accomplished a lot. That's why it's so appealing, and that's why it also can be so destructive.
Yeah.
It's like Flappy Bird being so addictive. It's like, bloop, 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 ooh, 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 ooh. And you're not really doing anything except jumping through pipes, and you spend 4 hours doing it.
Yeah, little hits of neurochemicals.
Yeah.
Well, think about Facebook. Facebook, another major release of dopamine and oxytocin is bonding with someone else, friendship, love. Well, now we go on Facebook and we have artificial bonding. So all of our dopamine releasing activities that kept us alive and really empowered us are now just simply done by clicking on a mouse.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, the internet and computers are incredibly powerful, and like anything powerful, that can be used for great good but also great harm. And I think I've used it both ways in my life, so I'm trying to cut out the harm and use more of the good.
Yeah.
Because without the internet, none of us would have all connected with each other. We would have never seen each other.
Well, that's the thing. I mean, nobody's advocating to get rid of the internet, but nobody really conceptualizes the effects that this sort of thing can have. And so it would be nice to have some sort of, like education system in the schools to understand the usefulness of the internet and also the other side of the sword, like what it can do if you're on it all the time, why you might even be attracted to being on it all the time.
Yeah.
So
And that's a good point if we want to get back on misconceptions, is porn addiction is more like an internet addiction. It is not sex addiction, which was one of the myths I covered. You'll hear a lot of people muddy the waters saying, oh, you're a sex addict. And if you tell a young virgin guy that's never had sex and can't have sex because he has porn-induced ED, he's not a sex addict. He's a porn addict. If he spends all of his time online searching for novelty, shock, and surprise, and he's terrified of going out and actually getting with a prostitute or something like that, he's not a sex addict. He's a porn addict / internet addict.
Yeah, there are sex addicts who use porn extensively, but with young guys especially who grew up with porn like I did, it was all about the porn, and it wasn't about sex, really.
Yeah. As my porn consumption grew, my drive for porn grew, and my drive for real people decreased.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Isn't it?
Go ahead, Gary.
Here's another reason why we need to distinguish sex addiction from porn addiction. First of all, the naysayers love to mix them up. Now, why do they like to do that? Well, they like to give sex addiction as the overarching condition and then give examples like President Clinton or Tiger Woods or famous movie stars, and then everyone goes, oh, boo, boo, those guys are just, has lots of women, and so they're just doing it as an excuse. They're just saying they're addicted. And then they like to put porn addiction under that so that people will conflate sex addiction with porn addiction and just poo-poo both of them. Another important reason is that in terms of the DSM, which is the Bible for psychiatry that has all the diagnoses, this is a way to prevent porn addiction from getting in there, is that they have this term called hypersexuality. And it's really almost impossible to define what hypersexuality is, the symptoms, who gets it, and they use that term so that it'll never, ever be put into the DSM, and they keep porn addiction under it so that porn addiction will never end up in the DSM. However, if you separate out porn addiction and look at its real signs and symptoms and the effects, you can separate it easy from these vague terms like sex addiction, hypersexuality, and get it into the DSM. So all of this is sort of game playing to prevent it from being recognized.
Yeah.
And they like to argue, another reason they like to say sex addiction is because, sex is something natural. But if we focus on porn leads to, in our case, porn-induced ED, and there's nothing natural about a young 18-year-old guy that can't get it up to have sex. So it's very important to distinguish the two because of neuroplasticity. You're wiring your brain for pixels on a screen, and that's not natural.
Yeah.
Same thing with food addiction. If I eat Twinkies all day long and cupcakes, eating food is natural, so they'll say there's no such thing as food addiction, but those Twinkies are not natural. They're supernormal stimulus. They're packed with fats and calories that natural food does not have. So if you only eat Twinkies, you can develop an addiction and your brain can be desensitized. Same with porn. So porn porn addiction will be more prevalent than sex addiction. Most sex addiction people do have some kind of trauma or something, but porn addiction happens all the time, we're seeing, because young kids have access to unlimited supernormal stimulation.
Accessibility. Yeah, and like we said earlier, those two things manifest itself way differently in the people who have it too.
Yeah.
So
yeah, it's not a blanket statement. It's not a blanket statement for everybody, but it needs to be clear that, you know, porn can cause problems without anything else. But
and it is different than sex addiction. You wouldn't treat the two the same if you were a therapist or a psychiatrist.
And the argument that something is natural that can't be an addiction is just silly. Gambling addiction has been in the DSM since the 1980s, and taking chances is very natural, but it can go awry. And that's what happens with gambling addiction. And porn is not natural. Sitting in front of the screen, clicking, has never existed before the 1990s. So I don't know how you can call that natural.
Yeah, and if they focus on sex addiction, they can ignore the 90 to 100 brain scan studies on internet addiction. And if the internet can be addicting, then porn can be addicting, because porn is on the internet.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So for people who have been inspired by all this information like we were, what do you guys think they can do to help spread awareness and help solve this problem?
Share the information.
Yeah.
I know it's a lot of people don't want to like share stuff on, let's say, Facebook or Twitter and stuff, but just talking with your boys, you know, like your group of friends, or if you're a girl, your group of girls, talking about this stuff, because it's not, again, like I said a couple years ago, I was surprised at how people reacted whenever I would just lay it all out there. So, you know, I'd be like, hi, my name's Gabe Deem, blah, 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 porn gave me a limp dick. And then you would think that they'd be like, oh, you're a freak. But they'd be like, seriously? Like, tell me more about that. So my encouragement to everyone listening is embrace that fear that you have and just do it, because you never know who you might help. Yes, you might get some some negative remarks back and some people that try and, do low jabs and make fun of you. But I guarantee you, if you just get one person that says, dude, you really maybe changed my life, or you really helped me see something that I never thought about, that'll make it all worth it. So that's my encouragement, is just embrace the possible embarrassment in order to help someone. And then you never know what could happen from there. And we have to speak up about it
and I think that helps in two levels. It not only helps spread awareness, but I think it'll help you in your recovery too. Talking to somebody in real life is really, really, really important. So I think it's a really important thing to do for the issue and for yourself.
Yeah, a lot of the anxiety we have is about people finding out about our secrets. So if you just lay it all out there, you have nothing to worry about, and no one can talk crap about you behind your back, because you already told everyone all the crap that's behind your back.
For people who have never experienced that feeling of just walking around the world or going about your life with nothing to hide, that's an awesome feeling, and you deserve that feeling. So please, if you can find a way, own your story and tell people, not just for them, but for yourself. That's a great piece of advice.
And if you're lurking on if you're a lurker on any of the forums, make an account and share your story, because the more stories we have, the more we can say, hey, look, this is happening, this is happening, this is happening. So
it's data. Yeah, so do it. Do it.
Yeah, that's a great way to start, is anonymously, because it helps you.
Definitely data.
It helps you put your story into perspective and helps you understand yourself. And the more you talk about it, the less of a hurdle it seems like. I know telling your mom or something that you're addicted to porn seems like a huge deal and your life will be over. But I've done that, and it's really not a big deal anymore anyway.
If you focus on how it's changed your brain too, that helps them also see it in a new light that they might not have looked at it as. Because if for instance, if we never thought about neurochemistry and how brain changes our brain, or how porn changes our brain, they probably haven't either. So if you explain that to them, they're like, oh, okay. So
we're at the forefront of something really special, I feel like. Something that's never been seen before in history or in science or in medicine. So people need the information, and it's just sort of, you can help them out.
Yeah, and I see these memes show up on NoFap or YBR where they still apologize as if there's no science, when in fact all the neuroscience only points in one direction. Whether it's nearly 100 brain studies on internet addicts, whether it's the 3 recent brain studies on porn users, whether it's the thousands and thousands of animal and human studies over the last 60 years that show all addictions involve the same mechanisms and brain changes, all the actual hard science only points in one way. Do not confuse hard science with science masquerading as propaganda that's out there, put out by a large group of sexologists. Now, I know that's a pretty bold statement, but having read those studies and analyzed what they actually say, that's not hard science. So the hard science points in one direction, the propaganda masquerading as science is propaganda.
I think people receive doubts too because, you know, professionals in health sometimes, like their GPs or their therapists, refuse to believe it or don't believe it's true. So
because they equate porn as Playboy magazines. They think a 50-year-old doctor, urologist, or whatever thinks of porn as magazines, maybe the occasional VHS tape, and he doesn't even understand the difference between internet porn and old school porn. That's another myth, is they'll say, well, you know, video porn's been around for, you know, a couple decades now, and you know, I didn't develop ED, so these young kids should be fine. What they don't understand is the occasional DVD where you have to drive to the store and get it is totally different than having 10 tabs open of gangbang anal cream pies all playing at the same time. It's totally different. Can't even compare the two.
And, you know, most of the conversations, as we know, really aren't about porn. They go into the urologist and say, you know, I masturbate a lot, so does that cause ED? And the urologist says, no, masturbation doesn't cause it. The word porn never enters the conversation.
True.
Which a lot of people, only us realize that nofap actually means watching porn while you masturbate. When the regular, you know, people in the world that aren't porn addicts, let's say, they hear nofap and they just think, you know, no masturbation. They don't think porn. So that's a big problem with the movement, is that there needs to be an emphasis on porn.
And you know, if you are experiencing doubts too, I feel like you just stick to your guns on the information. You're quitting porn is not going to hurt your libido. It really shouldn't. You don't need porn. You know what I mean? So what do you have to lose?
And no matter how much people can cast doubt on whatever science you throw at them, people will have a much harder time casting doubt on your own experiences because you know those best. So give it a shot yourself if you haven't done it yet, and just find out. And then you can use that information, your own growth, to help people and inspire people.
Well, that's the way it is with every medical condition. You know, doctors are late to the party for all medical conditions. First, people show up with it. People have it. Let's say go back to HIV and AIDS. Well, people were dying from it for years before they suspected something happened. Then it took many more years to even begin to identify HIV and the mechanisms. And still, they can't cure it. So science is always decades or centuries or completely behind the 8 ball on reality. You guys are demonstrating reality, all three of you, by having a medical condition, removing a variable, then healing from it. So that's reality. Science often doesn't tell us what reality is because it doesn't have either the ability or the desire to study it.
So Gabe, what do you think? You brought up the difference between nofap, meaning just no masturbation, and nofap, meaning no porn. And I don't want to pry, but how do you feel that masturbation fits into your own life now? Does it still have a place?
No, it doesn't have a place, just because I feel like I've whacked off enough in my life. I would rather use my sexual drive on my partner. And that's pretty much it in a nutshell. I feel like masturbation does hold a man back, literally, while you hold yourself. And if you don't do that, you'll have more energy to go out into the real world and, let's say, you know, produce and cultivate your job at work. You'll have more drive to go talk to a real girl. You'll do all these things. And so I personally don't see any benefit to masturbation. Plus, we know the science on is it good for your prostate and all that is not there. You'll have a wet dream if your body needs to flush the pipes. So I don't see any benefit of it, just me personally. I'm not gonna tell you not to do it or preach against it, but I just don't see its benefit at all.
Another myth that I see sometimes is people are worried about, is it healthy not to masturbate and not to have an orgasm or a release? And I mean, I can't speak for everybody, but for myself, I've gone without orgasm for, I think my longest period was like 5 months, and sure, I had some minor blue balls at times, but nothing ever serious. And I don't have wet dreams, so I didn't even have that release. So don't worry about it. You might feel like you're going to explode sometimes, but you're not really going to explode.
Yeah. Yeah. I had blue balls too. I went over 100 days without intentional orgasm other than wet dreams. And cold water really helped. Jump in a cold shower or just take the faucet and run it on your nuts, and it really helps the pain go away. For me, my experience.
Good to know.
Get rid of pain with a little bit of pain.
Yeah, for me, masturbation is tied too intimately with porn, and opening up the door at all to self-pleasure would open up the door to porn again. And I agree, I'd rather use that energy to put myself out there in the world and accomplish, or only share that experience with a partner. And that makes it, I think, more special when you do have a partner, that you only experience that pleasure with them.
Yeah, and there's nothing really inherently wrong with choosing to masturbate in your reboot as long as there's no porn involved in it. But I will say that a lot of people find that it can slow down their recovery, which is a question a lot. And so I always recommend that people go an initial long period without masturbating at all. I feel like all the success stories have that included. And then after that, it's kind of variable. Some people include masturbation in their reboot, some people don't, and some are able to recover. But there is a trend among young guys that they can't seem to make any headway with regular orgasms in their reboot. So I always kind of say, if you feel stuck, give up orgasms for a while.
Yeah,
and you might help.
If anyone wants to read about that, just go to the Reboot Basics, the Reboot Basics tab on YBOP, and it's on Reboot Nation, and it's a sticky thread. And if you're interested, you read it. It basically tells you what you just said, Charlie. Young guys with ED especially need to go without orgasm typically for a period of time, and then once they feel more balanced and their brain's more sensitive, then they can reintroduce orgasms back into the mix.
Yeah,
definitely. And I just want to point out, I'll be the other side of this. There's some people who have trouble with that, and it's usually young men who have OCD. They get into this place where their anxiety builds up so much that they then binge on porn yet avoid masturbating. So I've seen that over and over with young men with obsessive compulsive disorder. So they just need to be aware that they need to maybe masturbate and not look at porn. And then there's another thing is the guys really get tangled up with, okay, I'm just going to hang on, I'm not going to masturbate forever. And yet when they finally the dam breaks and they masturbate, they just go crazy on porn. And I wish they would have a mindset that said, oh, I'm never going to look at porn, but if I masturbate, so what? I masturbate, no big deal. So if they could have that mindset, I think that would be healthier.
Yeah, it's really different for individuals too. Some people have more of an addiction to masturbation. Like I have a friend who quit porn, but he just found that he couldn't stand not masturbating. And I have my own experience, and other people I've talked to, the addiction was to porn, not to masturbating. It was never really about the physical act of masturbating or even about orgasm for me. It was about constant novelty. It was about seeking out new images. It was about the porn.
Yeah, I think the distinction needs to be made for the guys with porn-induced sexual dysfunctions. They're the guys that really need to understand that porn is the problem.
Yeah,
if you're trying to reboot, no porn is the most important. I think we can all agree on that, right?
Yeah, no artificial stimulation. Yep.
And I would say no masturbation is up there as well, and that includes edging.
Yeah.
Because edging, I've found, it will only make things harder for you, and no pun intended.
Yeah.
But at least when I brought myself close to the edge and then stopped because I committed not to really masturbate, and that just caused all sorts of problems. It brought up that sexual self-satisfaction was an option for me again, and opening that door, at least for me, just made the whole thing harder because it was on my mind more. If rather I just said, okay, that's not an option, forget about it, go do something else, then I was just living my life and not worrying about it.
It's good advice.
So we have some questions.
How are we sitting on time, by the way?
Let's see.
I laid out of the call,
yeah,
so I don't have it.
I think it's time to go for questions because it's been about 50 minutes. Okay. So, I posted a thread to NoFap seeing if anyone had questions for Gabe Deem and Gary Wilson. It wasn't as much of a response as I was hoping for. Come on, NoFappers, you can do better.
Fast.
But, let's see. One question is kind of interesting. Is there any effect of abstinence on people with severe OCD or anxiety? And I think they mean any effect on that severe OCD or anxiety. Like, can abstinence from porn and masturbation alleviate OCD?
So we've seen a lot of guys with OCD, especially with HOCD, which means homosexual obsessive compulsive disorder, or there's also SOCD, which is sexual obsessive compulsive disorder. So it can happen to gays and straights. What we've seen is that when they stop, their anxiety goes through the roof. Mm-hmm. And when I say stop, that means masturbation and porn. And that's what I mentioned earlier. Sometimes these people need to occasionally masturbate just to reduce the anxiety, but they can still stay away from porn and porn fantasy. However, we've seen over a long term, as they reboot off of porn, oftentimes their OCD-like symptoms decrease. Mm-hmm. And anxiety itself, which is separate from OCD, that definitely can decrease, especially social anxiety. You have to really monitor yourself. If you have diagnosed OCD, you may have to see a psychotherapist, and you may even have to be on medication, especially if you have HOCD. You have to monitor yourself, and you have to really be careful about, how should I say, not taking it so extreme that you just cause yourself problems. Sometimes you need to go to a therapist if you have OCD. Sometimes you need medication.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's a good point too, that sometimes it gets worse before it gets better.
Yeah.
Because when you're in those withdrawal stages, you're probably going to get more anxious at times.
Oh, yeah.
But
absolutely.
Give it time. Have faith.
My 3-second answer would be, it depends on what is porn induced or not. So, like Gary said, a lot of people think they have OCD, depression, stuff like that, but it's really symptoms of porn addiction. So it just depends. If the OCD was there before porn use ever started, then I don't see how porn use would make it go away, but it would help. And then if it was caused by porn, then yes, it would help alleviate it.
And if you can remember, like, think back, okay, before I started using porn, did I have these symptoms? Yeah. And that might help you realize if it's porn induced or not. The same thing for HOCD. Guys ask me, well, I don't know, like, am I naturally inclined to be bisexual, or was it caused by porn? I said, well, before you ever used porn, like, what were your fantasies about? Did you ever fantasize about other men? If so, then you might be bisexual.
It gets even trickier now that 5- and 6-year-olds are watching it. So
yeah.
It's like they don't even remember before they watch porn.
Yeah, so maybe I'm lucky that I waited till I was 9 to start watching.
That's a statement. That's a statement I thought no one would ever say.
Here's another question. They say it takes maybe 21 days or 1 month to establish a new habit if you are constantly doing the same thing. Blah, blah, blah. But it's not the same for no PMO. If I stop for 30 days and when I relapse, all my old habits come back. Any cognitive explanation here? And I would say that I don't think there's any good research that shows that it takes 21 days to establish a habit. What do you guys think?
Not at all.
No, not at all.
I think that's a
and porn addiction's not a habit.
Yeah.
It's not a habit. That's the answer to that question. It's not a habit, it's an addiction.
Yeah.
An addiction.
Next question.
No, but here's the difference. So people, like, there was an article called on the art of manliness, and he did a great job on it. And he described all the brain changes. It was a 4-part article. Then he got down to part 4, habit. So he used all the information related to addiction in the first 3 parts. Then he decided, oh, it's a habit. Here's the difference. When it's an addiction, it rewires the brain to blast the reward center to give you extreme cravings to use despite negative consequences. That's not like biting your nails at all. Yeah. You know, biting your nails is something, I just do it by habit. I don't get this extreme urge that I can't control even though it's destroying my life. There's a difference. And then there's all the other brain changes that occur with an actual addiction.
Yeah. And biting your nails won't numb your brain's reward circuit either.
Yeah.
Yeah, and
No,
for
and it
anyone
won't-
who's wondering, well, is my porn use a habit or is it an addiction? I tried to answer that question. I posted an article on my website called How Addicted Are We? And I used the criteria for substance addiction and altered it for porn addiction. So if you're curious to see how you would score on that, go check it out. Addictedtointernetporn.com.
Nice.
I was a 9 out of 11, and I think it's 6 or greater is severe addiction.
Oh, sure. I'm sure I'd be at least 9.
Not anymore, though, right?
Yeah, not anymore. Not anymore. But
All
Back in
right.
the day.
So you had a couple of questions from people, Charlie?
I just have one. There's one question. It was a long one, but I'm just going to give the synopsis of what he said. Or she. I guess I don't know. But he or she is wondering, how do you, in a long reboot, when you're 3 or 4 months in and you're not seeing any results, how do you stay positive and committed and know that this is the right course, basically, is the question.
One thing
and this
is
person
to...
has been checked out by a doctor.
Okay, and the doctor didn't find anything, I take it.
Didn't find anything, yeah.
Right, so right off the bat, you know you're physiologically okay as far as the doctor's concerned, and then you also know that guys like myself took 9 months, and then we've also seen guys take 2 years or even longer. So if you're at 3 or 4 months, then you have tons of hope still, because there's lots of guys that have taken a lot longer than you. So that's right off the bat. And then the other point I would make is the brain can always change. One of my favorite books is The Brain That Changes Itself by Norman Doidge, and some of the stories they have in that book are just crazy. So if you're feeling down and depressed, I suggest getting that book and just really understand that the brain has an amazing capacity to change until the day we die. It doesn't just stop when we're in our 30s. So yes, recovery might be just taking forever, but with rewiring, which is maybe essential for younger guys, I feel like recovery is always possible. It might take a long time, but I feel like there's always going to be hope. So
Yeah. No, that's totally true. And on that sort of brain plasticity, I heard a story about a 90-year-old guy who went to a therapist for 2 or 3 years and had like substantial behavioral changes after all this. You know, he learned how to do some things different, and he was a much more positive guy at 90. Yeah, his wife called the therapist and said he's a completely different man. So
After quitting porn?
no, no, I don't think so. But I mean, he used this as an example to illustrate that brain plasticity occurs our whole life, and we're capable of making changes. So,
yeah.
Well, my
true.
question, you know, Gabe's answer is the great answer. My question is always, if you're ED, what else could be causing your ED? I mean, you always have to ask yourself, if I've checked out and I'm healthy and I'm young, then what other cause is there? So there's really nothing to lose. And the other thing that a lot of guys don't do is they don't do the ED test. Have you tried masturbating without porn? That tells you a lot. If you remember how your erection was with porn and it was pretty good, and it's really bad without it, that gives you a lot of clues. But what else could be the cause? That's what you got to ask yourself.
Yep. Yeah, if you can get a boner to porn, then you know your penis works and you have sexual conditioning to porn. It's a little trickier for the guys with severe porn-induced ED who can no longer get it up to porn. Those guys just got to think, okay, well, at one point in time, could I get it up to porn? And that'll at least give them some hope.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, and if you're one of those people, the best thing you can do is get checked out by a doctor. Because if you're checked out thoroughly by a doctor and you can't get it up to porn or masturbation, it's probably porn-induced ED then. I'd say there's a really, really, really good chance.
Yeah, I went and got my blood tested just to make sure I didn't have a hormone problem or anything, and my testosterone was actually really good, above normal, and I had no libido or sex drive. I felt like a zombie. So,
Yeah, people don't realize that the amount of testosterone necessary for erection is like 10% of normal. And they can castrate monkeys, and 2 years later they can get erections. So the amount of testosterone needed for an erection is really, really low. And if that occurs in someone who's 23, you usually have other symptoms, not just the inability to get erection. That'd be the last one. You'd have other symptoms also.
Yeah, I think people place too much emphasis on testosterone. Oh, my testosterone feels really high today because I had a great workout. It's not just testosterone.
It's like, what? Chill out.
But we have a few more questions.
Yeah.
A couple of them, I think, are pretty easily answered by going on YBOP and doing some reading, like about the flat line, why it happens, and how to make it more bearable. There are a lot of stories about that already. One question here that's more interesting is I would like to know more about delta phos B and how this being out of balance affects one's no-fap journey.
Delta, I'll leave that to Gary, but I know delta phos B just triggers all the gene changes in your brain. It's like a fertilizer for addiction.
Yeah, delta phos B, people, here's the problem when you make videos and you write articles and you're a physiology teacher, is you explain things simply, and you can't explain everything, otherwise you'd have a 1,000-page book on addiction.
Yeah.
So delta phos B, in this case, its function is to rewire the brain so that you crave whatever you've been over-consuming. Now, delta phos B builds up, it then causes genes to be activated, it actually structurally changes the brain, it rewires the brain, and then after you stop using, whether it's cocaine or porn or whatever, delta phos B goes down to normal levels. But the brain changes that occurred are still there, those addiction pathways, those Pavlovian pathways that can be activated. So it takes time for those pathways to weaken, no matter what the level of delta phos B is. Those pathways have already been constructed. So I wouldn't focus so much on delta phos B. What delta phos B does is it shows us that all addictions involve the same exact mechanism, whether they're drugs or they're natural rewards. That's the magic thing about delta phos B.
And one interesting thing about delta phos B is that it remains present and its effects remain present in the brain for quite a long time, months and even years, right?
Well, delta phos B only remains in the brain at the high levels for about 6 to 8 weeks after you last consume. However, if you do reconsume, let's say you take cocaine again, they're not sure, but you may jump up a little bit of delta phos B, but not much. So it takes a while to accumulate high levels of delta phos B. That's why it has to be chronic overconsumption. And then it takes about 6 to 8 weeks for it to go down. But you've rewired the brain.
Yeah,
and
those changes that have been...
Those changes stay.
You have dormant pathways that you can reawaken later in the future.
Yeah, like I just posted a recovery account, and this guy went back and said, I went back and used porn, and I didn't really like it, but I decided to use it anyhow. Then I used it some more, and I liked it a little bit more. So he chronically consumed, he reactivated those pathways, and he probably upped the delta phos B to strengthen that pathway. So that's why you don't want to continue to binge after binging one, is now you're probably building up delta phos B amongst other changes.
Yeah, definitely be careful experimenting with porn after a long reboot. You might at first say, like, oh, I'm not into this anymore, it's no good, but then it might be on your brain for a few days afterward, and all of a sudden you're like, oh, just one more time won't hurt. And then all of a sudden you're back where you were. So just be careful about that.
Let sleeping dogs lie.
Nice. So is that it for questions, or what else we got?
Well, let's take a look. Here's one. Monk mode, allowing sex but no porn or chicken choking. Is it effective? He wants to know, can I do a successful reboot while still having sex?
Yep.
Next
yeah,
question.
I mean...
Yeah. Yes, you can. First of all, if you can have sex, then it's obviously not too severe. You can get it up. But later in the reboot, for me personally, I did some Carezza, where it was slow, gentle sex without orgasm. And again, the key that tends to send guys back a little bit to a flat line is having that orgasm too early. And obviously that's different for everybody, so you have to decide when that is for you. But yes, you can have sex during a reboot and recover.
There can be benefits to going without orgasm or any release for 90 days or however long. That can, in my experience from people I've talked to, speed up the process. And also one thing that's really important that I've noted is not to try to force an orgasm. Like if you can't have an orgasm with penis and vagina sex, don't finish yourself off with your hand or use her hand, because forcing that orgasm is not going to help you reboot along.
Yeah.
That's what I did from month about 6 to 9. I forced a couple orgasms and I kept going back into the flat line. Yep.
I will say that the most of the success stories I see, there is an initial period of abstinence from orgasm. So I think during this time it's totally fine to rewire without orgasm. That's not a big deal. But I can't remember the last story I saw where the person didn't have at least an initial 30 to 60, 90 day no orgasm.
And Gabe mentioned Carezza, which is a great alternative for people who are trying to regain sensitivity but still want to have sex with their partner, and it's slow, non-goal oriented sex. I would describe it as. You don't even approach orgasm, at least in my experience with Karetsa. It's just a very sensual experience of sex without orgasm, without climax.
And it sounds very hippie-ish and weird, but some guy asked me, actually yesterday, he said, well, why would that be enjoyable if you don't get to bust your nut? And I said, well, do you like kissing a girl?
Yeah.
What do you enjoy about kissing a girl? Well, you like the mutual contact and the touch and bonding. So when you're having sex without orgasm, it's the touch, the bonding, and it feels a lot better than just kissing. So, you can still enjoy it. It's not, I know it sounds weird, but it's actually pretty cool once you try it a couple times.
And for people who want to know more about that, I think Gary knows about a website, right, Gary?
Yeah, it's called Reuniting, and it has information about it.
Yep.
Cool.
You about to say something, Charlie?
No, I was just gonna say, how did you pronounce Karetsa?
Karetsa is how it's pronounced, and that's
Karetsa.
Italian for.
I mispronounce it.
Me too.
So do I. I think I've been saying Cariza.
I just say it how people will probably read it. So
Yeah. So
And here's the funny thing. A funny story is it was developed, thousands of years ago, and it's been around the world. But a woman, an OB/GYN, an obstetrician from the 1800s, wrote a book about it and suggested it to all her patients, mainly because she saw how pregnancy and having too many babies was ruining relationships. So she then discovered that, wow, the relationship got better after the guy stopped ejaculating so much. So she wrote a book about it back in the 1800s.
Wow.
Interesting.
Pretty wild.
You have to imagine that, if you're a recovering porn addict, that's one of the best rewiring experiences you can have, particularly if the orgasm is detrimental for you. I feel like there's a lot to gain from that if you're interested in it. So,
And a lot of guys report feeling a greater energetic charge after Karetsa because they haven't had that orgasm. They're not in the post-orgasmic state of sleepiness or relaxation.
yeah.
But they're not wired up in a bad way. They're just more energetically connected with their partner and ready to go out and kick some ass.
Yeah.
Right.
yep.
All right. I have class coming up pretty soon.
All right.
So I think we should wrap it up.
Real life beckons.
Yeah.
Any
I'm
last
cutting it really
comments
close.
from Gabe or Gary?
I'll just say that if y'all want to know more about the myths and misconceptions that we've talked about, check out my YouTube video. Look up Reboot Nation or type in porn myths and you'll see it right there.
Yeah, I'll
gonna
put
put it
links to all
on-
these in
Yeah.
the description of the video. I'll put it on YouTube.
Yep, and I'm going to put it on the threads that we have too, so you guys can find it there.
And for more information, help, and support, check out Reboot Nation or the other forums, YBR, no fat, porn free. And then also for a ton of information, if you're not, you can actually sit down and read for a little bit. Read the FAQs on YBOP.
Yeah, all
Do
these
it.
questions have actually been answered, amazingly.
Yeah.
And all you have to do is go onto the FAQ and scroll up and down for your particular question, or just hit Control F, and you'll actually find it.
And if you really have a monstrous attention span, you can buy Gary's book or read my book.
You could read a book.
Yeah.
Get
One,
off-
One tip, I'll just throw out there, random tip, is print off an article and go take it to a park and read it. That's one of the things I did, and it was one of my favorite things to do during my reboot.
Cool. Good idea.
Excellent. Well, thank you guys so much for joining us today. It was an awesome show.
Yeah, thanks
Thanks
guys.
for having us.